Sometimes the mind plays strange tricks upon us, and with the passage of time, we find it difficult to separate truth from fantasy. Time has passed, about 2 years to be exact, and I feel I better write down my story before it passes into the gray area of unreality. You who read this story can expect no great prose, no witticism to tempt the chucklebone, nothing to challenge the imagination. This will be a straightforward account of what happened. You may believe it if you wish or refuse to believe it. Your acceptance or rejection of this tale will have no effect on the future of the world or the future of yourself. I had built a cabin in a small wooded area in southwestern Pennsylvania. The land comprised about 11 acres and the property is in south-facing slope, and a small stream and road separate this slope from another slope across the way. The other slope is rented, and upon it a farmer raises cattle. His land is clear of brush, and I can sit on the front porch of my cabin and occasionally see his cattle through the tree limbs and leaves. After I built the cabin, I began clearing the road and making other improvements on the property. This was to be my retreat from the world of teaching earth science. I am by nature an introvert, and the crush of large school classes, the conversation with people leaves me physically exhausted. The cabin and wooded anchorage were to be my bunker, protecting me against the outside world. The previous winter, I had slept at the cabin in the silent months of January and February. It was a cold winter, the coldest on record for the county, and often the ground was covered with powdery snow. Sometimes the moon reflected a ghostly image on the snow and the shadows of the trees, and often as not the snow would be melted and the moonlight then played upon the decaying leaves, the dry grasses of the woods. I was alone and would return to the cabin to sleep each night and embrace the silence of the woods. Here my mind played strange tricks, and in the moonlight I believed I saw shadows which among the bare tree trunks, shadows which were watching me. I was not exactly living in the cabin by choice. I had committed an indiscretion the year before, and my wife Sally asked me to leave so that we could work out our desires and needs without distraction. In short, she'd kicked me out. We would meet occasionally, and I would tell her about the ghostly watchers and the quiet of the winter nights. She would laugh and recite the stories of the watchers from the old New England poets' tales. I finally returned to live with her and my children in the college town and had forgotten about the shadows of the night. I was once again consumed with teaching and the mundane matters of society and marriage. This adventure, which I'm about to relate, began in the evening of a hot August day. I had been digging a small pond by hand, and the sweat rolled from me freely. I am so prone to digging ditches, holes, ponds, embankments, and the like that I named the cabin areas the diggings. Anyways, after I had sweated enough and worked enough, my habits called for me to retire to the porch of the cabin and enjoy a beer. I had made my way up the slope to the cabin slower than usual, since I was extremely tired that day. I went into the cabin, got a can of cold beer, and went back to sit on the porch and relax. I took the beer, flipped open the can, and sat on the side of the porch with my feet up on a bench in front of me. I heard a slight noise to the right, and so I lifted myself and peered around the side of the cabin from the porch, and there crouched before me was a large, hairy creature. In an instant, the creature turned and leaped into the bush to the back of the cabin and was gone. I stood stunned. My God, I thought, I must have shouted it out loud. What to do? Shall I tell anybody? Whom can I trust? Did I want hundreds of people tramping down my property? Could I believe what I saw? A poet friend of mine from West Virginia told me a story from his past. He was a boy growing up in Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania. He and I, handfuls of loot, were standing around in a general store on a wintry day when a large snowy owl landed on an electric pole near the store. He said that every one of us boys, save he, ran home to get his gun. The first to return shot and killed the owl. My trouble was twofold. I did not want people around and did not want to see anything killed. I had given up hunting 10 years before and even winced when I cut down trees to clear my road. Certainly, I did not wish to see the creature harmed or killed, even captured, was against my personal feelings. I disliked going to the zoo and seeing animals in cages. The present system of building natural habitat for zoo animals sometimes alleviate my distaste for the capture and public incarceration of wild animals. The argument that zoo protects certain species is a valid one. I was trained as a scientist, and if I had to, I would track the creature, if all possible, and study it. I would keep the incident to myself, since anyone seeing Bigfoot-like creatures were portrayed as loonies by the news media. I take this method now to tell of my subsequent meetings with the creature and the events that followed. You may doubt me or believe me. Your opinion is of no consequence to me or to truth. The second sighting. There are many grassy areas in the cleared patches of my woods, and often I would see these trampled down. My speculation was that deer were bedding in the area, although I had never seen deer except one in a situation which I will repeat later. I combined my property and the adjoining properties for signs of the creature, but could not find none. I wanted to tell somebody about it, but who would believe me, and what good would it do anyway? So I was alone in my search and extremely frustrated. Being alone has never bothered me, and I have always liked my own company. No one can get along without another person, so I would be remiss if I indicated otherwise. August passed and September came along. Apples were ripe, and I would gather these and keep them in a basket or put them out on the porch railing for raccoons or whatever it was that took them from the railing. It finally came to me that it might be the creature that took the apples. However, I did find both squirrel and raccoon tracks on the porch in wet weather. I had given up hope of even seeing the creature again and went back to digging the pond and sweating. I had made myself comfortable on the porch at dusk and was munching an apple when the creature appeared at the railing about 8 feet from me. I had positioned myself in the middle of the porch to avoid looking into the low sun. The neck and head of the creature were above the railing, and with a hairy arm, it reached out, took 2 apples, stared at me, then turned and bounced into the bushes again. I rose slowly and walked to the edge of the porch and peered into the bushes. I lowered myself over the railing where the creature had appeared and walked towards the bushes, but the creature was not to be found. When I returned to the porch, I noted that the railing was over my head by an inch or so, and that it was at least 6 feet high. Later, measurement confirmed height at 6 feet 1 inch. Estimating the size of the creature's head, it must have been 7 feet tall. I was able to confirm this later, but wish to relate the story to you exactly as I remember it. My first impression was that the creature was ape-like or man-like, about 7 feet tall and covered with short brown hair. Its eyes were large and its mouth expressive. It did not have a large protruding jaw or excessively thick lips like artists' concepts of ape men usually have. The body was powerful with well-developed legs. and shoulder muscles and sporting a protruding stomach. A somewhat long, limp penis hung between his legs. The protruding stomach may seem normal when one considers apes and seeing pictures of them, but when an artist conceives the human is pictured as flat-stomached and muscular, which is a misconception. Stand on the street corner and you will observe that humans are flabby with protruding guts. The older the human, the more protruding the gut will be found. I can say this, or I look down over my own creepy obesity. So you should not consider the creature to be much different than humans on that basis. For about a week thereafter, I set apples in the railing to no avail, but set out 2 at a time and would not leave more than overnight. Why should the creature want my apples when he could pick his own from any of the wild trees that abound in the area? The reason for the creature's appearance at my cabin escaped me. There was plenty of wild food in the surrounding environment. My wife Sally wondered what the hell I was up to and why I spent so much time out at the dig-ins. The tension, which was already high between us, intensified. I had become hooked on the creature and yet could not divulge my obsession. Can you imagine any man telling his suspicious wife that he was late because he was tracking a large hairy creature? I finally hit upon some of the ingredients of my meetings with the creature. I had parked my car down near the pond and not at the cabin. I had worked hard and had a good sweat, and I was on the porch, so my next move was to work up a good sweat and stay on the porch of the cabin. The system finally paid off, for on the September day of an autumn equinox, I made friendly contact. I had a good sweat, the car was parked below the property, and I had my apple bait set out. My first impression was that the creature would not appear, for this was only the second day of my luring. As the sun began to set, I took a pencil and drew a line on the porch railing in an east-west direction for no other reason than I was a scientist, and on that day of the equinox the sun always sets in the west, and I would always be able to observe the direction from my porch. As I was turned about from my marking, I saw the creature standing about 4 feet from the porch. I stood still for a moment, and then I made a slight hand motion for the creature to come to me. I realized at once that it was not a human, and the hand motion meant nothing, so I retrieved an apple from my side pocket and tossed it at the creature's feet. I was able to confirm again that it was indeed a male, his penis hanging limply in front, scarily noticeable in the failing light. He picked up the apple, opened his mouth, and with one chomp crushed it in his powerful jaws. I threw him another, and on the third apple I spoke in a low hushed, tones increasing by volume to normal about the 10th apple. I was now finished apples from the chip basket on the railing. The creature loaded most of these into his arms and walked into the bush at the end of the small clearing and disappeared. The next evening he returned a little earlier and took apples from my hand, but would not really let me get near him. As long as the railing was between us, he was calm, and when I went to leave the porch, he would walk away and watch me over his shoulder. The reader might ask, was I not frightened? I can assure you that I was. Highly excited and frightened may not be the proper descriptive term. My temples were pounding, and I wondered if I was physically up to the excitement. I have always prided myself on not being afraid of anything, and that this seemed to be a situation in which the creature was afraid and I was the aggressor. I have traveled somewhat in Europe and have slept amongst hostile gypsies in Hungary and faced a knife point in the alley of Piccadilly Circus in London. When these adventures occurred to me, they seemed unreal, and as if they were happening to someone else, perhaps to my alter ego or some other psychological manifestation of my personality. It was, and is, this sense of unreality about life that makes me unafraid. Besides, I was a scientist, and this was a situation in which all true scientists wish to find themselves someday.